Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of the HKGAGPodcast. The third time it's been revived. In this first episode, I will be having Kaden over here. Kaden would like to introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Kaden, and I'm 16, and I like football, basketball, and tennis, and I only like watching it. I don't like playing it. That's weird.
No, that's not weird. That's like very common. Anyways, today we're going to be talking about moderates versus more radicals and localists within the urban camp. So, for those who don't
Yeah,
know, like just a refresher, yellow ribbon refers to those who support the democracy in Hong Kong, the protests, or blue ribbon, like the government supporting the police, supporting the Chinese Communist Party, and yeah, that's basically the general gist of it. I know from personal experience, Kaden, you are a very moderate person. Would like to elaborate on that?
yeah, because for me personally, I'm yellow. I'm against the CCP's rule, but for me, some of the yellows are becoming like the really extreme radical yellows. For me, are becoming more and more like the CCP themselves, and that is something that is in terms of like how they act, how they treat others who do not view it the same way as them, even those that are what they would more moderates consider to be similar in terms of views. They would, the extreme radical localist yellows, they're just acting more and more like the CCP sometimes, in my opinion. That is highly disturbing considering the CCP is who they're against in the first place.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a bit of a concern, given that like I don't think it's one thing to say, oh, I want Hong Kong independence, like that's perfectly fine, like that's a
Yeah,
valid thing.
perfectly valid.
But the problem is when you say something like, oh, I believe that we should declare war on China and it's justified to kill and hate all 1 billion mainlanders because this and that. And generally, I've seen some really shit takes from managing Hong Kong Gag and
Same,
talking.
same.
So yeah.
So for me, the reason why I'm such a big like voice on regarding like localists getting more and more extreme is because for me, that is the extreme act. I know they're not the all yellows are like the extreme mainland hating violent people, but a lot of people I know turned were once yellow but became blue. What like after the protests, especially now around now, because they view like the yellows as too extreme, too xenophobic, and I understand that a lot. I would understand why some people would see like the localists since they're the most outspoken ones, to be honest, and like the ex yellows turn blues would probably turn against the pro democracy camp because of these localists.
I like this.
Hello.
I feel like good grasp of international politics, and there's this kind of view that kind of like a very misguided view of the world and how the world sees China. And I think that's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
why a lot of people support Donald Trump because people saw Trump as like a protest candidate or someone who, from a certain perspective, stood up for China. Like,
yeah.
a lot of people like to say, "Oh, the Democrats like they pander to China," but like, yeah, I
I
think
honestly
both,
don't see. I don't see that. I don't see that.
both the Democrats and the Republicans, they try to
Yeah, yeah.
go against China.
Mention stop
You
China.
know,
Yeah,
argue like the morals, but that's a different story. Like, I don't think it's good to
yeah.
support Trump. Just to
A-
say that
And
he's a savior or something.
yeah, but I also want to raise another point I really have a grind against for like the radical localists, including some I know personally, and that is for some reason, despite sharing the same like protest, the factors of protest, because Donald Trump said they were like crap rioters, the radical yellows immediately are against the Black Lives Matter movement. I know a lot of like radical locals that say, "Oh, the Black Lives Matter movement is toxic, it's communist, etc." And that really, really pisses me off. Really, like
It's just
legitimately. Really, the yells against Black Lives Matter really, really piss me off a lot.
yeah. I think
It's
Black Lives
shame.
Matter. I think a reason why some people hate it is because some people argue that it kind of took away attention from a movement here in Hong Kong and just
Yeah, but
get what they mean, but I don't think that it's entirely the fault of the BOM protests themselves. Like
Yeah.
For those who don't understand, like BLM, there's the organizers, which is more corporate, and like the people who are actually involved and the people who are actually angry about the state of things in America. Like in all cases, I don't think the people are to blame.
Yeah, and can I say the point?
Yeah, sure, go ahead. Sorry.
I think like Hong Kongers who don't understand why the Black Lives Matter protesters are so angry, just please go. I mean, they should study a bit. I mean, like Hong Kongers probably, there could be a bunch of like yellows or like radical localists who might not have a grasp understanding of U.S. history involving slavery, and they might not be able to empathize so much with the Black people who have like been oppressed for like pretty much their entire history.
Yeah, I think it's definitely something to be aware about, but also generally when you also have to consider that by the time BLM was happening in the US, like the protests are kind of simmered out even before like the national security law was enacted.
Yeah.
Of COVID and stuff. And yeah, it's just generally kind of but like, I think at this moment I don't think there's so much anti-BLM discourse, but more so anti-mainland, anti anything Chinese. Like Lie HKG is one of the biggest, evidences of this.
Jesus
It
Christ.
definitely is concerning.
Yeah, the amount of anti-mainland hate actually in LHKG is so disturbing that I honestly think like I should just go on the LHKG app and if I can get a world record quickest speed run just by searching up like some anti-Chinese slur, I can break a speed run or something. Like search. If you don't get what I'm trying to say, like there's so much hate against mainlanders, but take just mere seconds to find like something that is really discriminatory to mainlanders on LHKG, basically.
Yeah, I feel like that. Generally, I think what a lot of people don't understand is that there's a lot like on the mainland. From what I've heard from mainland friends, or like people who have friends in the mainland, and that the situation there, really up and around saying that they're really pissed with the CCP, but they're certainly not supporting it. They're kind of like apathetic in a way, like they're not what some people like say. It's like, oh, there's so much support for the CCP. Like it's generally not quite like that. It's more so a lot of people who just are afraid to speak out because of how oppressive the system is.
And I really do have lots of points against the localists, like the radical localists. My next point is the localists say they act like that to the mainlanders because almost all the mainlanders are bootlickers of the CCP. To that, I respond like, of course, you do see lots of times of the mainlanders bow down to the CCP, like during like the Uyghur slave labor cotton controversy, when like lots of like Chinese celebrities included posted like, I support the Xinjiang cotton. But here's the thing, they're indoctrinated. They are literally been brainwashed for generations. That's the point.
Yeah, it's like indoctrinated, like silenced.
Yeah, they've been brainwashed since youth. And I honestly can't really blame the mainlanders for that. Because they've lived in China. You can't choose where you were born. Come on. That's where the localists have failed horrifically in terms of like their logical points.
I feel like that. Like it's just generally just like kind of a confusion because of some localists. Like I've talked to some people, like mostly those overseas, and a lot of people feel like that. Oh, guys trying to fight like not really. Like most people want greater autonomy, but the main focus is democracy, and alongside that, the preservation of some sort of one country, two systems. It's like AKA greater autonomy. Like even though the supporters independence has risen in the past couple of years since 2016 and 14, which is when the Umbrella Revolution happened. It is still relatively a minority compared to those who like still support the original 5 demands, which is like we just want democracy.
Yeah.
In that case, like, and I have to reiterate this: like, if you support Hong Kong independence, like that's perfectly fine, and I get why you think that.
It's a valid view. It's valid view. Understand why.
Yeah. But the problem is when you say something like, "Oh, the Hong Kong police force are worse than the Imperial Japanese occupation." I'm like, that's you can't just compare like that.
Both are bad. Both are horrific.
Both are horrific.
Yeah, but okay? When Okay, I'm currently studying Imperial Japanese history in my history class, and I saw footage of the Nanking massacre for the first time ever. I do not even want to comprehend what I witnessed.
I
I
think
do not want to comprehend what I witnessed. Jesus Christ.
I've mentioned this before way back, but like the comic artist won a guy, like fucking hell, man. Like, they are probably the kind of person that will have a really bad cultural shock if they win the award. Like all this stuff, and it's just really very anti-Chinese. Like no, how say anti-Chinese and anti-CCP. Like they're quite described, or not described as locusts, cockroaches, and they seem to be very 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 sympathetic to the West. Like they're saying, oh no, in the West, like they still have to always listen to teachers. Like there's more freedom, but like that's not saying the West is perfect. Have you seen? Oh god, I'm sounding more like yeah, but
Yeah, the West
West,
definitely is better than the mainland.
but they have their own issues basically.
Yeah, but the West is not perfect. America is not perfect. There are still a lot of issues. I'm not saying to see mainland China is perfect. There are lots more issues as well. Every place has its own issues. Nowhere is perfect.
Yeah.
And it's just different levels of worsening issues. And what another thing is like how I don't know if you remember this. Most people probably do. Remember like last year and last summer, there was this guy that stabbed a police officer. Probably remember this, right? You probably remember this. Hello, are you here? It seems like
I'm thinking, yeah. Like generally, like things like saying like,
and yet people were praising.
Like my attitude towards like more radical methods of protesting has softened a bit. Like I'm not as harsh on it.
Yeah, but when the guy stabbed the police officer, I follow lots of strangers on social media, and lots of them are radical localists. Half of them were just praising the guy. Half of them were treating him like he was a martyr for the cause or something like that.
Yeah, that's like.
I honestly do not understand why. For me, the fact they were celebrating a man stabbing another man, sure, the man might have done a lot of horrible things, but it's honestly sickening how someone said, if you don't want the police to be brutal towards you, then why do you have to? I understand why he would be angry at the police. The police have done horrific brutality, but it is in no way okay to celebrate or glorify someone stabbing someone else, whoever it may be.
It's just it's like this trying to put him on like a pillar, like a martyr. Like I don't think that's the right thing to do, and it's kind of really unnerves me. Like I like this. I don't know. It just feels like that.
Feels weird. And if I were to tell my online friends from the West that these were the Hong Kongers' reactions to the stabbing, I would actually be quite ashamed to tell them they're from Hong Kong. Just disgusting to me.
I think I do get the rationality to a certain extent.
Yes, I do too, but
it doesn't make.
But sorry, someone's coming in the room. Not now, please. I'm doing something. Sorry for that.
Hey, don't worry about it.
Sorry.
Anyway, continue.
Sorry, I'm trying to record something. Sorry for that. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. Don't worry about it. What was I talking about again? Yes.
Okay, anyway, just open the door. Sorry, my helper just wants to grab some like fruit for me. I'm just that could happen occasionally. I'm sorry for that. Yeah, cool. Everything's okay now.
Yeah, cool. No, just in general, I feel like a lot of people just they feel like they feel like they're in a very like their situation kind of influence that like in desperate times they're driven to more extreme methods. Like I get that, but at the same time, it doesn't mean.
Yeah, of course.
Like,
I do history. I've seen, of course, like the reason why Hitler came to power was because, of course, like people were fed up with the Weimar government, so they were like thinking about extreme people like Hitler. They feel like he's the savior of Germany. It sounds like the same thing here to glorify the martyr. For me, Of course, not to that degree, but you understand. Right? People will definitely get to extreme methods if they believe like something is bad. That's for sure.
To me, it
Can you,
feels that in general, like I've seen a lot of bad takes from others that just things like, oh, Hong Kong's on the same level of Afghanistan. Like I get that the situation in Hong Kong is pretty bad, but like it's not Afghanistan bad. Like I think we have
yeah,
to understand. I think again, it's mostly a very
um,
lacking, I guess, lacking, lack of a better
lacking
term.
understanding of the Middle East history and stuff.
Not just that, like just geopolitics. Like I don't.
Yeah,
I feel like
in Afghanistan, girls can't go to school. They don't have basic drinking water. You have
yeah,
both. We have both here. We have one of the highest living standards in the world. I'm not saying like the CCP is good and all, but we do have homes that are the living conditions in Hong Kong are like are probably 100 times better than in Afghanistan. Don't compare. It's not even worth comparing both.
yeah,
Don't compare.
they don't compare. Yeah, just because I feel like in like West, there's not really a clear pro. Most countries not really like pro Hong, like a pro Hong Kong anti, or like a more pro China party. Like it's
I
pretty much bipartisan on an all fronts, and I feel like you can argue again. You can argue, oh, they might have ulterior motives, but like the point is that there isn't really like an anti-Chinese force in the West right now. Like not
yeah
anti-Chinese, pro-Chinese force in the West right now in politics. Like that's the
yeah
thing, like that. And I think
yeah.
that actually caused some people
I've I've
to see
seen
the West as
I've
saviors.
seen even more stupid international political takes, such as this one. Last year, when Israel like launched rockets killing thousands in Gaza, people in Hong Kong were like, "Come on, Israel, destroy the Hamas," because Hamas supported the national security law, like Palestine supported the national security law. So people were like, "Come on, Israel, come on, Israel." Wow,
Yeah, it's just
another stupid take.
yeah.
How many stupid takes have I seen? Oh, human rights matter. Human rights matter if it's China that's doing it. Oh, human rights don't matter if it's a pro-Chinese government in the force. Hypocrisy.
Yeah, I think it's just in general. I've seen that a lot of people don't really. I don't think a lot of people really. I think like because of like how quickly the situation is turned in Hong Kong. Like a lot of people have to these more extreme ideas. Like in like a political Hong Kong, I contrast with the more moderate Democrats like Emily Lau in the 1990s during the late colonial era. Like those who are
Yeah,
more like moderate Democrats that generally wanted cooperation and like even like up until like a few years ago, the Democratic Party was trying to cooperate to come up with like a deal. And I remember a lot of localist and radical parties that are more, which I get, but at the same time, it's not like they did that. I know
yeah, I've
the League of
seen.
Social Democrats was founded because of the Democratic Party's decision and they decided to go the road. And I think generally
Yeah,
up until like 2019, actually it's quite surprised. Like the Democratic
party.
opposition was quite divided on a lot of issues. It was like 2019 protests kind of like gave them like a cop and go in a way, and it's quite interesting to kind
Yeah,
of see what has happened.
yeah, and here's the thing, right? I know like some like really radical localists have called out people for being too soft on China, like some of the pro-democratic figures as well, like Martin Lee. Some people actually criticize him, and I find that he's called the father of democracy for a reason. I
Yeah,
mean, he's to criticize someone they call the father of democracy in Hong Kong. That's really ironic, isn't it? You're
I
fighting
don't
for
think criticism
democracy.
is bad. In a democracy, you should pretty sure that there's criticism against other people. That's definitely something you should always
Yeah,
between criticism and yes. unbridled hate and
I
it actually brings me to another point about unity, which I mentioned briefly earlier. Like there's it's like kind of like, of course we have to be united in these times and like we have to stick together, but at the same time we should be free to critique each other. Just because we're on the same side doesn't mean that we're not perfect. We need to criticize others, we need to criticize each other, and while we can still maintain a united front while still make sure that we are respectful to others. Honestly, yeah.
I'm as moderate. You said I'm a very moderate yellow. That is true. I'm moderate to the point, to be honestly, like where I say sometimes I say I use one word to summarize because like most Hong Kongers, I do have mainland Chinese ancestry. That is something I absolutely cannot deny. So when people ask, where are you from? I reply one sentence. I have the blood of the Chinese and the heart of a Hong Konger. That's how I reply. That's my slogan.
I'm a bit different on that. Like I feel like I identify myself as a Hong Konger, but if someone calls me Chinese, I wouldn't be mad. Like I would call myself more of like Hong Kong Chinese or like Hong Kong like Chinese.
I wouldn't say I'm Chinese first. I'm Hong Konger first, Chinese next. But I wouldn't like deny my Chineseness. I would never do that because it's like where my ancestors come from, and like the localists who deny their Chineseness, it's kind of sad for me. I understand they're against the CCP, but for almost all the famous localists were like, of course they're all descended from the mainland Chinese, and of course the man who just got released, Edward Leung, another very localist activist, like he was I think born in Wuhan as well. So I think you cannot deny like most of the localists have Chinese connections as well in terms of ancestry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like the ironic thing is that a lot of Hong Kongers are descended from mainland Chinese. Like any of I'm assuming that most people here are like young people listening in, are young people or teenagers that grew up with Hong Kong with local parents.
Yeah, but
like it's generally like most of them are most of the grandparents grew up in mainland China. So
for me, I'm a fourth generation Hong Konger. Like my great grandparents fled Guangzhou when they were like 18 or 19. That's just how I know, I guess.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like the irony here is like they're some of like the radical yellow's logical fallacies are so bad. It's actually making me laugh at how failed their anti-mainlander fallacies can be. Yeah. Do you have anything else to say?
No, let's continue.
Yeah, let's continue.
I think I think it's a lot of. I think we can boil it down to like hypocrisy and a lack of understanding of geopolitics in the wider scheme. And it definitely is something that I think a lot of Hong Kongers need to understand more. And this is going to be I've received a lot of comments because like when I manage Hong Kong Gag, like I have spoken out against the more radical sects of Yellow Ribbon Gang.
And sometimes when you speak out, the comments are quite radical. I have seen that.
Yeah.
You probably have as well.
Yeah. Like back during the 2020 election, I made a few posts about criticizing Trump. Yeah.
And you got flamed.
Have like 100+ comments and imagine what they all feel.
You were just arguing in your comments, weren't they?
God. Yeah. And I get why, in such a trying time people would support Trump, but that doesn't make it okay because, populist candidates.
Trump has said lots of stuff, quite problematic things that have made my eyebrows look suspicious.
In general, things that are
quite weird. He's quite a weird personality.
I think that's.
He's quite a weird personality. I cannot think of anyone that's like controversial. For me, Donald Trump is like a double. It's a coin. He's like a coin. You either really love him or really hate him. I've never seen anyone that stands in between. Fun fact of the day.
I have seen some people who've stood in between, like especially after the Jan 6th, like people stand in between. Yeah. Like, you can't deny that
he did take a lot of part
especially
in
appeal
that.
to a specific audience of
Yeah,
people.
and like how so many conservatives, are like still not just in Hong Kong but in America as well, still see the Jan 6 incident as a last ditch effort to save the USA.
Yeah, like the rural working class, not working class, rural Rust Belt mining communities. Like these were what Trump tried to appeal to. And I think compared to Hong Kong, it's just more disillusioned portion of the populace. I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's probably more exaggerated online, but you can definitely
of
see why.
course.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I feel like the radical localists, I would say 90% of the radical extreme localists are around my age. Like 15 to 25, I would say, is the most common age for radical localism. Definitely, by far. And I can understand why.
I think, in general, like I said, the disillusionment, appeal to Trump.
The
Trump need to be strong against China to kind of appeal to.
But the only reason, I swear, if Biden decided to do even more really strong sanctions on the CCP, like boycotting the Beijing Olympics, for example, the reason why so many localists still view him as like a bootlicker to the CCP is because of the way Donald Trump described Joe Biden, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah,
the way Donald Trump spoke about Joe Biden, even though Joe Biden is doing a diplomatic boycott of the Beijing Olympic Games, they're like, he's just pretending. No, he's not. Seriously. Yeah.
In our
Weird.
home, just this kind of in the US, how some people like to refer to the Democrats the party of China, of Russia, they're socialist, communist. First of all,
weird,
are not socialist at all. They're not even really left, to be honest, except for a few factions. But second of all, it's just in general, I think I'm gonna say this: most Hong Kongers don't really have a grasp of what communism really is. Even the government doesn't really understand what it really is, because
say China is more fascist than communist.
Communism is really just what most Hong Kongers. This come from an assumption from a lot of discussions I've had. What most Hong Kongers see as communism is really whatever the CCP does, and whatever China is doing.
Yeah, but most people say the CCP is more fascist than communist. And
it is.
I've seen comments like this. I've seen comments on a more fascist organization, which I think
state capitalist.
Yeah, I do see lots of similarities to fascism. It's just communist in name. Which brings me to how, speaking of geopolitics, I don't know if you mind if I switch a bit of a topic.
Oh, don't worry.
What?
I said don't worry.
Yeah, because geopolitics is something I've been interested in for a very long time. Because ever since I was up in primary school, I had an interest in it already. Yeah, I had an interest in primary since I was a kid. For example, most kids who are 8 years old won't research about Vladimir Putin and what he does. But I was pretty much Googling what Putin did and why he was infamous and like that. Pretty weird for an 8-year-old, isn't it?
I didn't really start looking into geopolitics until when really it was the Ukraine, similar to you, it was also for Putin with the Ukraine invasion, 2014.
Yeah, Putin. I wouldn't say it started with Putin, but for me, because I like telling people this fact, when I was 5 years old, I could memorize all the capital cities of the world and which it was. At the age of 5. At the age of 5. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And this is coming from a guy. And this is coming from a guy who just barely passed his IGCSEs, Lamau.
I think what I like to see as how do I say this? Back to geopolitics is just generally it's something that you learn more as you grow up. You see more of the world and see it's
yeah.
And I mentioned this before. I have always been a huge history and geography nerd, but was never really interested in like
Same.
history. So it's more like political and economic. I found that more interesting, to be honest. So yeah, it's just,
Yeah, but I'm not interested in economics, that's for sure. I
yeah.
did IGCSE economics and it bored the hell out of me.
Yeah, I didn't do economics actually, so.
But because for me, like, because like in school I had to do economics because I had to choose between business and economics. I just found it more cool, but I'm not gonna do both anymore. But yeah, I don't know, because another thing I've always wanted to say, another topic is like how we are both speaking. For me, my English has always been far superior to my Cantonese and Mandarin.
Yeah.
Because people often like ridicule me for like my uh English being better. One of my blue ribbon, I have a classmate who I've known for 10 years. He's a blue ribbon, okay? Just because I speak way more English than Chinese, he calls me an American bootlicker.
Well, you could have at least said British, to be honest. Anyways.
I don't know why. Because he always associates me with America for some reason. Because it's probably because I use lots of like American measurements, like 5 feet 7 inches, 300 pounds. I use these measurements a lot. So it's pretty. And like people call me America, like the blue ribbons call me, you're a bootlicker for America. It's weird, isn't it?
And with back to Hong Kong, like with localism, like I think I've noticed is that a lot of localists and independent supporters, actually most of them, if not all, I've seen don't really come from like the expat space, like international schools, like or
Mostly come from the local schools. Yeah, I've noticed that as well. Yeah, I've seen some international school radical yellows, but that's like a very rare minority in most international schools. Not gonna lie.
I haven't met any. Like at most, I think there were some people who were like, "Oh, we need like if
Independence.
we need more." No, not independence really. It's just we need to become more left and transfer to a more socialist system. But that's pretty much about it.
Wow.
That's pretty much about it. Like even again, it's just communist supporting groups in Hong Kong. When I say communist, I mean like socialism. The most is like long hair with he's a Trotsky, and even then he's not really popular because of his beliefs. But it's just
and I know he's a pro-democracy guy, but he kind of acts weird sometimes.
Yeah, he kind of
lie.
Like before the protest, he acted very sensationalist in a way, like very
yeah. He's kind of like the clickbait guy. If I'm being honest.
Clickbait, but it's kind of
yeah, very sensationalist man there.
Yeah, it's just very trying to grab attention.
And do you think like the Hong Kong school system, like the local government school system, is to blame for like local schools having an excessive amount of like radical yellows?
Yeah. Wait, you cut out a bit there. Can you repeat that?
Do you think the government, the local school system or education system, is responsible for the amount of radical yellows in the local schools?
Maybe, like definitely the Hong Kong education system might very competitive in a way, but I wouldn't say it's solely because of that. I think maybe it could have just been like Hong Kong society in general, like how it's because localism. When you really look at it, like localism didn't really become something like after the Red Revolution. Localism, I would say, like 12, honestly.
Yeah. I'm older than the localist movement. Ooh. That's just something fun to say. But
not very old, thinking about it.
Yeah, it's a very new idea for me. Definitely a new idea. The first time I experienced it was, of course, the Umbrella Revolution when I was like 9 years old, and I didn't understand what they were making a fuss about.
Idea of like Hong Kong, since like the 1960s, and even the 1950s. But the idea of actual localism and foreign independence, that's something that's like an actual force, not just like a small group, has only really come in the last decade. And it's definitely quite interesting to observe how this has evolved and how how the Yellow Ribbon camp has kind of changed over. Because overseas, I feel like a lot of Hong Kong misunderstand that we're generally not. Some people would like to think, and there are differences. Like obviously, we're more united because of what has happened, but in general, there are still differences on what is the best approach for people in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
Even amongst the Yellow Ribbon camp.
Of course. Yeah, we are very divided in the Yellow Ribbon camp. We're not like this one united anti-CCP force. You said it like that. Yeah, I think it's pretty safe to say. Not just in Hong Kong, like, but when we observe like foreign protests or independence or whatever movements, I'm sure they will also have lots of divide within themselves as well. That's something I think I will have to take note of when observing the news in the future.
Yeah. Like I mentioned earlier, how the comparison between the more moderate Democrats of the 90s, and the more localist forces, the more radical. Was like it's quite a big comparison, and yeah.
Yeah, I would say people often say the Hong Kong democracy movement is a left-wing movement, like in American politics terms. But for me, they are pretty right-wing, especially among the radical localists. They're pretty damn right-wing for me.
Yeah, there are some right-wing parties in it was quite recent. It was made within the last 4 years or so. And yeah, it just shows how there are a lot of opinions. We are not, and we're not as united as we like to think we are. It's definitely a delicate balance between preserving unity and preserving and trying to be respectful.
The same views.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, can I just make a quick note here? Because I need to go now. I have a test tomorrow. I need to revise for it, but I don't want to answer. So I want to make a conclusion from what I've just said, basically.
Yeah, we can start concluding now. So yeah.
Yeah, for me, main conclusion for me would be to be against the CCP is a good thing, but to be such xenophobic and have such a lack of understanding of world geopolitics while having this view is kind of bad. Not kind of bad, really bad.
Yeah.
The anti-mainland views literally have changed the way they view so much in the world to such a distorted extent. It's kind of disturbing me.
Yeah, it's just, in conclusion, I would say the situation in Hong Kong has led many to turn to the more localist radical side, and you also have the evolving of localism as a force in Hong Kong, and in general, it's quite democracy, though it's worth looking at the rationality to understand why people think like this and why they believe this is correct.
Pretty interesting to talk to you. It's been a great pleasure.
Yes, it's been a great pleasure in this first episode
Thank
of the
you.
podcast. Let's hope this actually works. Let's hope this doesn't.
Let's hope this doesn't end after 3 or 4 episodes. Yeah. I hope it doesn't, because I feel like I've talked to you. It's pretty enjoyable, and I hope other people can feel the same way about this as well.
Right. So.
But yeah.
Thank you all for listening.
No problem.